If you develop software products, there's much more than the feature set. Keep that in mind. When we talk about product development, we're not talking about just feature implementation. We're talking about a system that helps us to understand things and to support other functions. The MVP is always such a discussion about the minimal viable product around features, what is necessary, what is not, that is overthought that the MVP is placed in a system of testing hypotheses. So when we talk about software products that are embedded in various electronic devices or applications or even web development, we want to have a product that is able to be testable. What does it mean? Well, it means that to the set of features we have to implement a huge set of diagnostics to capture the usage of the features and the usage of the customer. We also need a diagnostic set for production purposes if we talk about embedded system, or if we are talking about an online system. The logging is quite extensively, especially if we go into games. The game setup, the environment to develop games, it's such a huge entity of grabbing data, capturing data, creating data. It's unbelievable. It's its own technology. So, a lot of companies have tried to break into the embedded market, and a lot of companies have figured out that this is quite difficult. Spotify just recently last year came into the market with a new device and a new offer. To their application, they offered now a hardware device that you can place within the car. The idea was that cars that have not an entertainment could now use Spotify directly in the car electronics. The problem, the company feature set, the minimal viable product, didn't capture that people are really not just one device people anymore. We are not living in the 80s. People want to have multiple things, especially in cars, as Android CarPlay and Android Car Things are quite common. So people trying and using the car thing from Spotify were confused about the lack of features, the lack of abilities to show, for example, Google Maps. So while they were in the rollout, they scrapped the project. You can see that hypothesis about the usage and to capture that usage is quite critical in a product. When they scrapped it, they had a huge backlash from the society because Spotify tried to implement a lot of environment-friendly procedures. They reduced the app size. It was a laughingstock now, as hundreds of thousands of objects would be scrapped and e-waste. Why? Because the object that Spotify created couldn't be open sourced. They were a closed system, and Spotify, for various reasons, didn't allow their objects to be used without their setup. That is another thing that we have to think about if we are developing a product. How much of the backend is necessary? And there's a huge trend in society to backlash against that. So while on the one hand we want to have a system creating and validating hypotheses and giving us the insights of behavior from the customer and giving us the information to troubleshoot the device, it's also true that you have more than the consumers, you have a lot of stakeholders, especially in the compliance section and especially with cybersecurity. In Europe 2 years ago, for the first time, an IoT device, a lamp, was forced to be taken off market because the company couldn't produce the lamp without vulnerabilities. And the EU said that those vulnerabilities introduced into the ecosystems of consumers would violate their rights of not being compromised. NIS2 is one of the reactions of the EU now to harden the system against malicious attacks. If you develop software products, there's much more than the feature set. We can see that the product backlog and a product roadmap is much more than a feature discussion. It is true that the consumers do care about a feature set, It is also true that you have more than the consumers, you have a lot of stakeholders, especially in the compliance section and especially with cybersecurity.